The Northbane pack had not lost a war in 11 years, and everyone said the reason was simple. Kael Draven, their alpha king, was a man no enemy could touch. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and calm in a way that made other leaders nervous. He had survived 3 separate attempts on his life that year alone, and each time, he had walked away without a scratch. Other packs spoke his name as a warning. Northbane parents told their children that if they misbehaved, Kael Draven would hear of it, as if he were something between a king and a ghost story. But strength like his came with a strange kind of loneliness. Kael trusted almost no one completely, not even the people closest to him. He had learned, over years of betrayals and quiet plots, that the safest way to rule was to keep most of the pack at arm's length. The only person who seemed to slip past that distance, without ever trying to, was a young woman named Wren Ashby. Wren worked in the pack's infirmary. She was an Omega, soft-spoken and careful, the kind of person most wolves barely noticed in a crowded room. She had joined Northbane 2 winters earlier, after her own pack was said to have been destroyed by a band of rogue wolves. She rarely spoke about her past, and no one pushed her to. Packs took in survivors all the time, and grief was something everyone understood without needing details. What people did notice about Wren was how good she was at her work. She had a gift for healing that seemed almost unnatural, stitching wounds with a steady hand and calming even the most frightened patients with a few quiet words. She kept her head down, avoided gatherings when she could, and always seemed to know where the nearest door was, as though some old habit refused to leave her. Kael had crossed paths with her many times over those 2 years, mostly when injuries from training or border patrols sent him to the infirmary. He had noticed, in a distant sort of way, that she never quite met his eyes for long, and that she always positioned herself near the room's exit when he was present. He assumed, like most people did, that she was simply nervous around an alpha as powerful as himself. It did not occur to him that there might be another reason. The night that changed everything was the night of the pack's founding feast, an old tradition held once a year to celebrate the day Northbane's first alpha claimed the territory. The great hall was filled with firelight, laughter, and the smell of roasted meat. Wolves from allied packs had traveled in for the occasion, filling the long tables with unfamiliar faces. Kael sat at the head of the hall, half listening to a story one of his warriors was telling, his guard lowered just enough to enjoy the evening, the way a king rarely allowed himself to. No one noticed the stranger who slipped in through a side entrance near the kitchens. He wore the plain clothes of a serving hand, carried a tray of empty cups, and moved through the crowd with the unhurried calm of someone who belonged there. He passed close to 3 different guards without drawing a second glance. It was the kind of entrance that should have been impossible, the kind that suggested he knew exactly which halls were watched and which were not. Kael laughed at something said to him, raised his cup, and did not see the man circle behind the head table. The hall was loud with music and conversation, full of distractions, exactly the kind of evening an assassin would choose. The stranger's tray dropped silently to the floor, and a thin blade slid from his sleeve. What happened next took less than 2 seconds, though it would be talked about in Northbane for years afterward. Wren, who had been standing near the healer's table refilling a bowl of herbs, turned at a speed that did not match anything anyone had ever seen from her. She crossed the distance between herself and the stranger, before most of the hall had even registered movement, and by the time Kael turned his head, drawn by some instinct he could not name, the threat to his life was already over. The hidden blade meant for his throat never left its owner's hand. The hall fell silent all at once, the kind of silence that feels heavier than noise. Every eye in the room turned toward Wren, who stood very still, her breathing controlled, her expression unreadable. The fallen stranger lay at the edge of the head table, and the danger that had walked into the feast unnoticed was no longer a threat to anyone. Kael stared at her. For one long moment, he did not see the quiet healer who avoided his gaze in the infirmary. He saw someone else entirely, someone who had clearly trained for exactly this kind of moment, someone who had been close enough to protect him without him ever realizing how closely she had been watching. The hall erupted into noise again, guards rushing forward, the feast forgotten. Wren was escorted, not unkindly but firmly, to a private chamber to wait while the king decided what to do with her. She sat with her hands folded in her lap, calm on the outside, though her mind was racing. She had known this day might come eventually. She simply had not expected it to happen in front of the entire pack. When Kael finally entered the chamber, he did not raise his voice, though the question in his eyes was sharp enough to cut. He wanted to know who she really was, and why a healer who flinched at loud noises had just moved like a trained fighter to save his life. Wren did not deny anything. She had spent 2 years building a quiet life out of half-truths, and she was tired of carrying them alone. She told him the truth, slowly, choosing her words with the same care she used when treating a difficult wound. Her pack, she explained, had never been an ordinary one. It was a small, hidden order, made up almost entirely of Omegas, trained from childhood, to protect others, without ever being suspected of danger. The world rarely looked twice at an Omega, which made them perfect for the kind of quiet work her people did. She had been raised since she was a small child to move unseen, to read a room before anyone else did, and to act faster than most warriors twice her size. Her pack had not been destroyed by wandering rogues, as everyone believed. It had been betrayed and wiped out by someone working from inside a trusted alliance. Someone who had used their knowledge of her people's movements to set a trap. None of them survived, except her. She had fled with nothing but her training and her grief, and she had rebuilt herself as a healer, because it let her stay close to people, without ever drawing attention to what she truly was. She told Kael that when she arrived at Northbane, she had noticed something troubling almost immediately. Patrol patterns that should have stayed secret seemed to be known by outsiders. Small details about the king's movements had a way of reaching people who had no business knowing them. She had not joined the infirmary by accident. She had stayed quiet and watchful, because some old instinct told her that whoever had destroyed her first pack might be circling this one too. Kael listened without interrupting, though his jaw tightened more than once. He was not used to being protected without his knowledge, and he was even less used to discovering that someone in his own court might be the reason his life had been in danger 3 times that year. When Wren finished speaking, the chamber was quiet for a long moment. He did not banish her, though some advisors in the days that followed pushed him to. Instead, he made a decision that surprised even himself. He asked her to help him find the person responsible, since she understood the shape of this kind of betrayal better than anyone else in his court. What followed was a careful, quiet investigation, carried out mostly at night when the rest of the pack slept. Kael and Wren went through patrol schedules, guest lists, and old reports together, looking for any pattern that did not make sense. It was slow, frustrating work, made harder by the fact that whoever they were hunting had clearly been careful for a very long time. Working closely together changed something between them. Kael had spent years keeping people at a careful distance, but Wren had already seen the most dangerous moment of his life up close, and there was little left to hide from her. She, in turn, had spent years hiding everything about herself, and found it strange, almost uncomfortable at first, to finally be seen clearly by someone who did not flinch at what she was capable of. There were tense nights, disagreements over how far to push their search, and more than one moment where old wounds surfaced, his anger at being lied to, her frustration at having to explain herself again and again. But there were also quieter moments, late conversations over maps and candlelight, where the distance between an alpha king and a hidden protector slowly began to close. The trail eventually led somewhere Kael had never wanted to look. Patterns in the patrol leaks pointed not to an outsider, but to someone deep inside his own circle, his beta, a wolf he had grown up with and trusted since childhood. It was a discovery that struck harder than any blade could have. The betrayal, they learned, had grown out of old resentment, a wound from years earlier, when the beta had been passed over for a position of greater power, a grievance he had buried for so long that it had quietly poisoned him from the inside. When the truth came out, the beta did not deny it. Cornered in the training yard with nowhere left to run, he admitted what he had done, the secrets he had passed along, the trap that had destroyed Wren's first pack, and the attempts he had helped arrange against Kael's life. It was a heavy, sobering moment for the whole pack, the kind of betrayal that left scars even after it was resolved. Wren stood beside Kael through it all, no longer hiding what she was. For the first time since arriving at Northbane, she fought openly, not from the shadows, not as someone unseen, but as an equal standing at the king's side. The pack that had once seen her as a quiet, unremarkable healer now understood exactly how much she had been protecting them, often without anyone noticing at all. In the months that followed, Northbane slowly returned to its rhythms, though changed in quiet ways. Kael appointed a new beta, someone he trusted for entirely different reasons this time, and Wren, who had once kept to the edges of every room, found herself standing beside the king not as a hidden guardian, but as his acknowledged equal, eventually becoming his mate in a bond the whole pack came to respect. The story of that night at the founding feast was told and retold for years afterward, though never quite the same way twice. Some versions focused on the assassin who had slipped past every guard. Others focused on the king who had survived another attempt on his life. But the wolves of Northbane who had truly been there always remembered it differently. They remembered the moment. They learned that the quietest person in the room had been the strongest one all along, and that the most dangerous person at that feast was never the man holding the blade. It was the Omega no one had thought to watch.